Welcome to the Intuitive Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Rafferty, medical doctor, PhD, shaman, and Reiki intuitive healer. I'm here to bring you on a journey of holistic healing that explores the science of the physical body combined with mental and emotional well-being, energetic and spiritual health. And I am so beyond excited to be talking to you today because we will be going deep into a self-mastery with the wonderful Nilesh. So it's so lovely to have you here, Nilesh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
And I'm so excited about chatting to you today and for everybody to hear all these beautiful tools and wisdom that you have to share, because I came across you it'd probably be over a year. Oh, it'd probably actually be close to 2 years ago now on Instagram. And I immediately connected with the content that you were putting out. And I also really, really loved that you were a fellow medical doctor that has began to forge this beautiful path to bring people on a healing journey outside of, I suppose, the standard way that we are taught medicine and what healing looks like through the Western medical model. And it's been such a privilege to actually watch your growth and expansion over the last couple of years. And I feel like the journey that we both bring clients on and that we are both on ourselves, it just aligns so beautifully. So when we began inviting guests onto the podcast, you immediately came to mind as someone that I was so excited to reach out to. And it is such a pleasure to have you here. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tony. No, I know we actually also resonate on the lifestyle medicine world, didn't we? We both are part of that, and I think that's been integral to my journey to help me challenge beliefs and challenge paradigms of what, how we can grow and develop and serve. So absolutely.
Do you know, it's quite interesting because I found on my journey with a lot of this stuff was actually lifestyle medicine was a gateway into kind of exploring other ways to help people on their their healing path. And then actually, once I kind of started getting deeper and deeper into that, I was like, God, there's so many more kind of routes we can take from each of these lifestyle medicine pillars, essentially. And kind of journeying into the mind and kind of how we can work with ourselves to kind of live a really happy life that is joyful, and we're pursuing joy and love and what that looks like in the heart. um that's where it kind of ultimately led me. And that's a lot of what I do in my practice. And I use lots of different tools to kind of go on that journey with people. And I'm so looking forward to kind of taking a bit of a deeper dive into kind of how you bring your clients on a journey as well. I always love speaking to other people that have kind of followed a similar path. What's kind of brought you from medicine to where you're at now?
Yeah, and I just want to extend so much gratitude for inviting me on, because the alignment is so pure and completely on point, Tony. Well, I like to think of it in 3 steps. I'll keep this as a short story. So lifestyle medicine, I was working as a doctor, and like many doctors, I realized that many of the tools that I had studied really hard for just weren't effective. And so I studied lifestyle medicine, which taught me that your health depends on your daily habits. And so if you like, that was getting to know the body. Okay, but what makes us not do what we say we're going to do? Because of course, the habits for health, you can find anywhere, but many of us weren't doing them. And that led me to study the mind. Of course, it was stress was the reason why people don't engage in healthy habits. And me too, right? And then as I progressed on the journey from the body to the mind, then I asked, what's the real reason people feel stressed? And that's because they're not connected to their purpose, their spirit, the source, the universe, whatever it is that you may use to describe that term. And those terms all scared me quite a bit, because I wasn't brought up in a spiritual way. I was in the spiritual closet, as it were, for years. I was reading books without telling any of my friends. But it's just this combination, your health depends on your daily habits. Stress originates from the mind, but what's the root cause? Going right to the root cause. What's the root cause of all of our problems? And really is not knowing who we truly are, the true self. And so that's, if you like, my short journey from the body, mind to the spirit.
Oh my God. I loved it. There's so many things that you've said just resonate so deeply with me. I love your use of the term the spiritual closet.
Yeah.
Because obviously as a gay man I was in the gay closet, and then I went through the whole journey of coming out into the out from the spiritual closet as well. And it is funny, like the everything you're saying about the kind of road or the path that you've taken to get to where you're at now, it just resonates so deeply with me. The kind of the journey from the body, which we're taught in Western medicine, and it's quite fascinating. The physical body is so powerful and magical. I find it just so beautiful, the physical body anyway. But then to journey into the mind and to recognize just how powerful the power of our thought is, that blows my mind. And then when we go even deeper into that and look at the energy that comes as a byproduct of kind of the thoughts we put out into the world, and kind of our connection to kind of higher powers as well. And as someone who was very logical myself through my PhD, my medical degree, it kind of pulls you out of the body into the head in an overthinking way, and it disconnects you from energy and higher power, because a lot of academia kind of, it doesn't believe in a lot of these things. So, with the really rational mind, once you start expanding beyond that, you just think, how have I not realized this decades ago? And why was I not told this when I was younger?
And I completely resonate with that. And you've described that beautifully. But actually, I've got this book right here, and it's a real cracker. And this defines what the mind actually is. Because I went through, there's a charity called Mind. We talk about this word, the mind. I really didn't understand what it was. And it was people like Dr. Daniel Siegel, who came from a medical background, from UCLA, phenomenal guy. He got together with 40 other people, 40 other experts, and not just medical doctors, sociologists, psychologists, people from all walks of life. And they came up with the following definition of the mind. The mind is a process that regulates the flow of energy and information. And then all of a sudden, my own penny just dropped. And I thought, well, I've got to learn about this thing called energy. Energy is anything that gives us the ability to accomplish something. And information, he defines in the book, is anything other than the self. So it really kind of blew my mind, to describe the pun, excuse the pun, when I learned about this definition. And I started to realize, okay, well, the mind is just a process. So if I can direct the mind, then I direct my energy. And then all of a sudden, healing, growth, transformation can take place with more ease and less like just forcing and frustration, which I definitely, was in for quite some time.
Oh my God, I love this. I love it. Because it resonates. Everything resonates with me that you're saying, and I'm going to just keep saying that this whole episode. I can feel it. But it is really wild, because a lot of people that come through to me actually, and when we get deep into things, they're like, I'm trying to manifest, I'm trying to work towards like this goal or that goal or the other goal. And it's interesting because when I describe to them what energy is and the vibrations and the frequencies that we need to operate at in order to bring about manifestations or begin to dream our world into being, like the shamans like to say, it's so important. And I'd love, do you discuss this with your clients? I'd love to hear your take on how you describe that to people, like the vibrational frequency of kind of bringing that beautiful the manifestations, I suppose, is a hot topic these days. But yeah.
Sure, sure. I mean, the short distinction here is you cannot manifest anything that you don't believe exists within you. And so it's not about what you get, but it's about who you become in the process. And you will have heard this. And so, yeah, we do discuss that because, of course, everyone I work with, they come with a dream, a vision, a goal, a plan. And, often people, I tell them to tear up their plans because you need to be at a place of peace first. You need to be connected with who you truly are first before you start to actually set any goals and visions, because they're coming from your old conditioning, right? Because the mind, another phenomenal course which I've done, had me do all kinds of funny exercises, like looking at a water bottle and saying, I don't understand anything about this water bottle. And I don't know what this means. The thing is, if you really start to think about it, the only reason we believe in the things that we believe is because of how we have been conditioned. And okay, this might sound, I know people on the podcast might be aware of this, but I'll just share a little story. Like, there's a tribe in Namibia called the Himba tribe, and they don't have a word for the color blue. And as a result, on Ishihara testing, on color testing, which is a medical test, they cannot see the color blue. So if we kind of understand this from a point of manifestation, one of the biggest things that people struggle with is the beliefs that hold them back, the repetitive, persistent, emotive thoughts that hold them back. And so it's essential for people to understand their own paradigms, their own perceptions first, tear them down, get to a place of peace. And then from that place, you can actually kind of intend pure goals that serve the world and the highest good of all, instead of, often coming with the things that we do.
Oh wow, I love that. It's it's actually it's in line a lot with what I tend to say to people, and I love this kind of concept about the Ishihara testing and being able to. It's almost like being blind to something that you were never told was there, you know. And I have clients that come through to me, and when they're like, but that's where I want to go. And I'm saying to them, one of the common misconceptions about manifestation a lot of the time these days is actually you're still trying to manifest things from a place of wounding and limited beliefs. I said, so, if you're trying to get to, say, place B and you're at place A, that still involves the constrictions and the confines of the wounds or the trauma that we might hold. I said, but the universe might want to give you Z. And, I was like, the potential is so far beyond place B. You could potentially get to place Z if we actually really go deep into shifting the limiting beliefs. And, the manifestations that you're looking for now could be wildly different from what the universe actually has in store for just how great things could potentially be.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many things to talk about. I mean, I shared this amazing quote about faith. Because, at its essence, if you are really trying to go towards a goal, a vision, any kind of healing, faith is phenomenally powerful. And again, that word would have triggered me a few years ago. This is my favorite definition. Faith is when you see the invisible, believe in the incredible, and attract what the masses call impossible. And so with manifestation, that's what you're referring to with people want to go from A to B, but you could go to Z, is you have to have that belief in something beyond the limited conscious mind. You think about how limited we are as human beings. There's data on this, and forgive me if this butchers the data a little bit. Something like the amount we can process consciously versus subconsciously is exponentially different. I'm not going to quote any figures before anyone comes at me, but it's exponentially different. And so that's when things started to really shift with my clients, right? Because what I help them do is gain exponential impact without sacrificing their peace. The only way you can really do that is, as you're saying, kind of letting go of the conscious mind, like the thoughts, the goals, the visions, the dreams, what we think we want, and how it's going to happen exactly, and tapping into the universal mind, which knows all, sees all. Everything is possible and infinite from there.
I absolutely love this. Well, it's so interesting because I'm already jumping to the future conversation, like because I'm like, how do we know if we're in alignment? Like, but at the same time, I want to come back and ask you first of all, how do you strip back these kind of limited beliefs? How do you strip back the conditioning to get to a baseline and actually you can begin to figure out who you actually are and maybe what will be in alignment with your destiny, your greatest good? How do you get back to the baseline where we kind of are we can kind of see ourselves for who our soul is rather than the bags of the wounding that we walk around as for most of our lives?
It's a great question, and I'm I can speak quite intuitively, but also I do have a process. I'm going to go through that process with you. There's just three E's of belief shifting, and I'm just going to share with you. This is like decades of reading and studying and still going through all the testing loads of things myself, looking at the science, looking at the spiritual aspects. And it really just comes to these three things. The number one is emotional repetition. Okay. A belief is a persistent emotive thought. Like I said, we only know that this is a water bottle because someone at one stage told us it was a water bottle over and over and over again. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and literally I say something to her, she repeats it back, and that's how she's forming her belief systems. Never ever underestimate the power. In fact, I have, and I still sometimes do, on the hour have an alarm where I will emotionally repeat, if you like, affirmations. I'll put a little word on that at the end. Number two is evidence. Now, a belief becomes completely obsolete with new evidence. And I recommend everybody do this exercise at home. I want you to go through happiness, health, wealth. Think about your 10 biggest accomplishments in your happiness, health, and wealth. Okay. And I don't want to hear it saying that you haven't had any. That's just completely not true. Write them down, keep them at the forefront of your mind. And then you'll start to realize you created those things, and therefore you can create more moving forward. Then the third one, and this is really, really key, and this I've only recently kind of delved into this, and I really wish people knew how powerful this was because they would start with this. Embodiment is the third E. So, like I said about the mind being a process that regulates the flow of information, regulates the flow of information and energy. Well, the mind is also embodied, which means that if you really want to change your beliefs, it's essential to learn how to relax the body. And honestly, that is the skill of the modern times right now. Relaxation, peace, relaxing the body, because we're bombarded with so much information. And therefore, we're often like quite tense with just all of the stuff that we've absorbed from the world in the day. And so this embodiment piece involves relaxing the body. And then as a result, it involves you behaving, making choices that are aligned to your future self. So evidence, emotional repetition, and embodiment.
Wow, that's amazing. I think it's really, really interesting what you were saying there about living the life that you previously dreamed into existence. And this is a common conversation that I have with people because, they come through and there's this it's almost like there's this kind of anxiety going on in the body as they shift from this previous place of existence into this new existence. And it's almost like the discomfort is so huge because they're still holding on to what they previously dreamt into being. And they're afraid to actually let go of the energy of that and step into the new version of themselves that they actually are trying to dream into being. So it's almost like there's a discomfort as you reach that threshold of letting go of the past version of yourself and stepping into the future, new and expanded version of yourself. And sometimes I say to people, it's okay to grieve that version of yourself because there was a point in which actually you dreamed of being that person. So actually to let that person go and to step into the new space, it's okay to actually grieve the loss of that version of yourself because at one stage you really desperately wanted to be that version. And it's amazing to see people journey through that and actually get to the point in which they're mentally processing it, emotionally processing it. And then we do work together then to energetically kind of to to disconnect on an energetic level to past versions of self so they can fully embrace this new and expanded version of themselves. Do you see that in your practice at all?
Oh, absolutely. And I've seen it personally. I've seen it personally. What I want people to know is that, absolutely, I am very grateful for the place that I'm in now. But, I've had in the last, even since this journey, my father died in 2022. And, I've gone through a separation as well. And I've got a child with quite challenging behavioral situations and neurodiversity. And so I get it. Like it's full on. And for me, I was also going through that. I think the analogy that helped me most is this analogy, which I learned from my healer, between love and light. So as you are expanding, you're getting more light, more information. Like your expansion of consciousness is now, as you're expanding, you're becoming aware of new information, which is helping you live better, essentially. But with that new information, those new potentials, you need the love to come in as well. And this is it's an amazing thing I heard from my healer. This is why a lot of people, as they expand their spiritual capacities and they expand the amount of information they have, their energetic body gets exposed to. If there's not a lot of love and compassion going, a lot of self care for the expansion, well, then you get people being too tapped into a lot of fear and conspiracy theories, etc., etc. Whether they're true or not, it doesn't matter. But the point is as you're going through this expansion, like a child who's going through a lot of growth, needs a lot of love and attention as well. And this is why in our conversation we said self-mastery is the goal and compassion is the vehicle. You always need to do this with compassion for yourself and leaving that space.
I think it's so lovely that you've brought this in actually, because for a lot of the work through my more shamanic practices, when I do kind of soul retrievals where I go back to previous times or versions of ourselves where we lost little parts of ourselves, and through it's somewhat similar to psychotherapeutic approaches about kind of integration of the inner child, like going back to those previous versions of ourselves and meeting ourselves with love, reintegrating the energy. That's what I tend to do as part of my practice with that work, rather than just going back to the time. Going back with a sense of compassion, reintegration of the energy of self at that time, and kind of having a discussion with that beautiful younger version of yourself about what they need to feel safe in the body, and what compassion you can show those beautiful younger versions of yourself when you call that part of your soul back to your heart. And I think we can be so mean to ourselves, the way we speak to ourselves. As soon as I put my hands on someone during some deeper energy healing, I go into the solar plexus, one of the chakra points, and I've kind of been through all of the chakra discussion in a previous episode of the podcast. But sometimes the wounding that I feel in the solar plexus of people's energy, it's so deep. And, a lot of the time, the majority of that wounding is caused by self. And it can really impact someone's journey of recovery, I find, until we can meet ourselves in a gentler and softer way. And so compassion must be a huge part of your work with people, is it?
It is. It's the bridge that connects you between the head and the heart, left brain and right brain, front and back, connects lower chakras to the higher chakras, right? The heart chakra is what connects us to our physical self and our spiritual self. Compassion for me, in the Buddhist sense, it's showing an awareness of suffering and taking action to relieve that suffering. But for me, I like to define it as the ability to embrace, enhance, and release any emotional state. And it's the feminine energy, it's the essence of nurturing. So when you are going through struggles, which of course happens to all of us, then it's essential that we have that compassionate energy, and we leave space as well. Space is a huge one. We leave space for that expansion. um, yeah, I mean, the reason why I became so obsessed with compassion is because I came to it through a lot of personal challenge myself, and I started to just deeply resonate and get goosebumps reading books from Pema Chodron or the Dalai Lama or Kristen Neff, Chris Germer, all these people that I realized that I was the source of my pain, right? And just as you're saying, how critical I was about myself, how much I was overthinking, how isolated I had made myself, the shame and the fear and the guilt that I'd put on myself. And then after a while, when you can release from that, you realize that the joy and peace, it's actually a diagnosis of exclusion. It's when I like to use the analogy of when you go away on holiday and you go away, you sit on the sun lounger, you have your cocktail, and then you kind of just let that big sigh out and you go, ah, because there's nothing that you want to be different in that moment. Well, compassion allows you to experience that, every day, every hour, hopefully, if you manage to tap into it.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. It's so interesting, kind of this discussion about, you know, like the dark night of the soul, when we go through these really, really challenging periods, but they kind of force us in some ways. Well, they do force us if we turn to look at them. to kind of awaken our sense of actually the divine energy within every single cell of our body. We are the divine walking around, and we are kind of these physical beings experiencing the universe in our own traumatic way because we've created this kind of turmoil within ourselves. And this is why I kind of got into doing the work that I do, because when I look back to where I was at going through my dark night of the soul, and just how horrendous I felt on every level of my being, my physical body, my mental, my emotional body, my energetic body. I was completely detached from any sense of spirituality, even though I'd been quite spiritual in my teens. And the pain that you just carry around on the day to day, and that's normal. Like, you just feel like that's a normal way of living. And it blows my mind, that. And now that I'm here, I just want to be able to hold people to be like, you can be someone different. You don't have to be defined by the pain that you're holding on every level of your being. Like, you can journey to brighter, calmer, more peaceful places where you're the observer in your life. And if there's chaos and turmoil going on, the boundaries that you can create to actually protect yourself from a lot of that stuff and the peace that you can find, it is absolutely possible, you know?
Completely agree. And I think there's three practices that I still every day I ensure that I try and do. And I know you're a big fan of these as well because I can see them behind you. And just to make it really practical and simple, because people might be in their dark night of the soul. And even when I was most recently had my recent dip, no matter what you're experiencing right now, you just need to increase the level of these practices. And number one is silence. And I know it's painful if you're going through trauma to sit in silence, but when the waters are left still, then the mud clears. Like, you can see clearly, you can see the truth of the situation, and you can see the erroneous lies that the mind tells you from a place of trying to keep you safe and protected. Number two is nature. And I know you're a huge fan of nature, but even to this day, if I haven't sat just outside in somewhere green, and we could go, I know you're going to all kinds of amazing things about this, but I think the reason why it's so powerful is because it connects you with spirit. There's an energy that makes the grass grow. I mean, it is completely mind blowing if you think about it. And when you're in nature, you connect with that energy. And then the third, and this is the hardest one, but it's non-judgment, and it's making a commitment as much as possible. And when I started my journey, I used to like make a little mark on my hand every time I judged myself or something else. And of course, the spiritual you that needs to, feels calm and joyful naturally and peaceful. It's judgment separates us from our spirit. So being in that space of non-judgment is essential.
Mm. Oh, I just love this so much. The Everything that you've said there, I'm just like, yes, yes, and yes. Tick, tick, tick. Because I think it's really interesting, and I keep saying this about just society in general. It has forced us into a space where actually we've disconnected largely from community. We've disconnected from each other. My gorgeous cousin who works in the practice here, she's a beautiful psychotherapist. She's moved house and she's living in a space now where there's green, and all the kids go out and play in the afternoon. They're all playing with each other. And I think back to myself and I think that's how I grew up, playing with my hands in the dirt, connected with nature. And all the kids were out together, and it was just such a beautiful way of existing. Whereas everybody's on their tablets now, there is no silence. It is constant doing, constant striving, constant busyness. And when I actually went through my dark night of the soul, sitting with myself was so painful because you're holding so much pain and turmoil in the body that actually silence, it's deafening. It's so deafening. So you will look for literally any way to step out of the silent space. You're like, please, someone distract me, please. And now sitting in silence is one of the most beautiful things that I love. If I'm feeling overwhelmed by too much stuff, or The practice is busy. You're kind of being pulled in loads of directions. My mantra practice every single morning is one of the most beautiful times of my day where I can sit in complete silence, just connect with the divine energy and actually just create space, like you were saying, space to just allow messages to come in, intuition to flow, and actually just space to just hold the energy of something bigger than us, you know? And then, with regard to the connection to nature, we did a podcast actually on this last week. You know, through my shamanic journeys, you do rites of attunement essentially as like earth keepers, wisdom keepers. And just the power that Mother Nature has is mind boggling that we just don't really fathom. And even I was reading a lot about the research. One of my very beautiful family members has been in hospital for some time now and hasn't been outside the hospital, and the window faces a grey brick wall. And they are just craving to see something green. And of course, they don't let you bring flowers or plants into the hospital anymore. So there is a complete disconnection from anything natural. And, you know, but that's a yearning, a craving in her soul to just get back to nature and to just be out with her feet on the ground. And so that totally resonates with me as well. And then the piece around non-judgment, oh my God, I suppose it ties back into what we were talking about with the solar plexus with regard to the judgment of self. But we don't really realize actually how much we judge others on the day to day. You know, and I love that you're actually making little marks on your hand to be like, actually, what was going on today? How many times did you judge someone else? You know, and it just brings you back in. And I tend to find that actually all of these things, they all have a certain vibrational frequency. And when people come to me, they expand, their vibration, their frequency expands, they're rising their vibration. They don't like being around other people that speak in that judgmental way anymore. Their food habits change. How they want to live changes as a byproduct of their own energy expanding and rising its vibration. And I love that because I think it's so important on this journey that we actually take a step back to actually appreciate what's my intuition telling me here, you know? And I love that you work so intuitively with your clients. Can you tell us a little bit about how intuition ties into your practice?
I absolutely will. I will pick up on something because, I'd love to share that when it comes to your growth journey and you feeling like you're outgrowing people is something that I've personally experienced and a lot of my clients experience. And I just want to provide some value here for people because I'd just say to go easy on who you let go from. And I think it's really easy to see that, okay, as you're going on your journey and as you're expanding and your frequency's changing and your habits are changing, that all of a sudden they're not matched to you, and they may not be at that point in time, and I completely get that. But if you truly believe in energy, you also know that whoever has the strongest field will be able to influence the other. And so if someone is very negative, then if you like, you can see it in a few ways. This is your challenge to rise and really expand your true loving field. It's also a calling to look for the wounds within yourself, and they always are there, the ones that trigger you in other people. It probably is down to, and it was definitely for me, looking at people that I used to hang around with. It reminded me of the parts of myself I didn't accept, and it was that shadow work that I had to lean into and do. So I would just say that when you're going on that journey, yes, it's important who you're around. Yes, it's important that you're aligned, but also just be aware that you don't let go of too many people too quickly, because ultimately, people don't care how much you know; they care how you make them feel. It's all about people in the end of the day, isn't it? And the connections, and I've personally made quite a lot of mistakes on that. Let's talk about the intuitive thing again. Back to the body. So a big influence was the Silver method. I did the Silver Method for quite probably 3 years ago now, and it changed my life. It was phenomenal. I wasn't open to it at all when I started, but he essentially taught me to relax the body enormously and program yourself to have a relaxed body. And yeah, there's a few things about intuition that's important to mention for me, is that it's always clear, right? If you kind of have in a conflict, that's not the intuition, that's the ego coming in and telling you otherwise. So relax the body, number one. Number two, I'd say, is create triggers. So the Silver method that teaches you to have a trigger where you get used to what it feels like when you're going to access your intuition, and you make a little physical trigger. That's a very powerful thing to do. And questions, 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 right? Because intuition is all about you tuning in to a question, and start, like, you can start right now today. And so often what we do with my clients is get them to do yes or no answers on very simple things, and using the body as a guide. We could go into kind of kinesthesiology and things, if we want to, but using the body, feeling into your heart or your solar plexus, what feels good? Do I want this for dinner? Yes or no? And then playing with it and getting more attuned to it. And ultimately, I've tried both ways. I've tried living completely shut off from intuition, and I've tried living completely intuitively, and it's so much more fun living completely intuitively. And people might not understand the decisions you make or things that you do, but it's a lot of fun. And so I would encourage everybody to make that commitment.
I love it. It's interesting because I'd seen you put up a post akin to that actually on your Instagram last week, and you're like, it's much nicer and more fun to live in this way. And it's so funny because I think we are taught through conditioning to largely ignore our intuition in a lot of ways, because you're told to turn up in a certain way or to act a certain way. And for me, coming back to my intuitive ways, it was a sticky and a bit of a rough road, where you're kind of like, is it okay for me to actually open my throat chakra to speak my truth in this situation? Is it okay for me to actually lean into my intuition and actually stop people pleasing? Finding that actually no was a very large part of my journey back to my intuition. And that was so foreign in my toolkit that this whole concept of saying no to something, oh my God, it blew my mind. And then the guilt that came with that as a byproduct of saying no, you're kind of reaching for your phone to send a second message with a bit of a sugar coat so it doesn't hurt as much that you've said no to something.
I know that very well. And, it's because we're from that caring medical
Mm.
background, right? That we tend to really care about the emotions of others. And that's a superpower. That also means that you're highly influential because you're empathic, you can tap into them. Yeah, I mean, there's three things. So again, and you probably resonate with this, at the times when I was going through the most challenge, the things that suffered the most was my self-confidence. And so I looked it up and I was like, what is self-confidence? It comes down to three things. Number one is worthiness, right? Knowing that you are innately worthy of love, that you are enough. Number two is you are assured in your decisions, that you believe in your decisions. And then number three is that you believe in your accomplishments. So often we shut off from our intuition when we believe someone else's opinions more than our own. And I'm not saying you shouldn't ever seek expert advice. Absolutely, you should. But whatever advice, I always share this with my clients, share this with my patients. You need to tune in to your internal decision-making system, your guidance system, your emotions, and and then make the decision from there. And you can only do that when you're self-confident. So find out, like I said earlier, write down the accomplishments that you've made in your life. Realize that you created that happened. Think about the good decisions you've made in your life. How did that actually happen? And then the last one, of course, is know that you are completely, unconditionally, infinitely worthy of love, because that's who you really are. That's what we all are.
Oh, I love this, and especially because a lot of the people that I go on the healing journey with, that come through the doors, the wounding that's in their heart chakras, the lack of love for self, and a lot of them don't feel worthy of love, or that there is love coming to them. And just kind of even highlighting, we are we are all love. Our heart is so powerful and magnetic and beautiful. When we actually heal the wounds in the heart chakra and allow ourselves to fully feel what love is, to allow that energy in, but also to feel like we can love unconditionally as well. I kind of say to people, we are here to love and be loved. How do we go on that journey, to kind of bring those worlds together and heal the wounds? And I love this kind of exploration we've done within kind of stripping everything back to come back to self, knowing that actually we are worthy of love is so huge, and that we deserve love like a birthright. And hopefully that will then bring us into alignment with how we can expand and go on the path to achieve our highest good. And I just love, and I want to bring back in the alignment piece here now as well, because I'd love to kind of know a little bit more from your practice with regard to how do people know when they are in alignment, when they are moving towards that kind of beautiful place of their highest good.
So, very simply, wherever you are right now has a dominant set of emotions, beliefs, and habits. And you may not be conscious of them, but that's making a state of being: emotions, beliefs, and habits. And whatever you want, whether it's better health, more wealth, a better relationship, it's due to a shift in a dominant set of emotions, beliefs, and habits, right? And your emotions are energy in motion, or what I like to call your chemical compass that reveals your truth or your truest self. And so your emotions are the guide to tell you about whether you're in alignment or not. And you will see, I've put a few posts out recently about this, but there are some kind of little signs that you'll know if you're on the right path. Because sometimes it's difficult to know. You can consciously tap in and say, yeah, I feel good today. I feel inspired. But these are the signs. That, number one, people start to magnetize towards you, right? You have a goal or a vision, and out of nowhere, just people like Tony come in to invite me onto the podcast. That's an amazing thing. And you notice it. Number two is you start to feel like quite blissful in the body. The body starts to feel like quite light and not heavy, and yeah, almost feels blissful. Just the presence of it. Number three, I mean, I could go on. I'll just mention three. I won't go on for too many. Number three is that you start to love the shadow aspects of yourself as well. So even though you've got this goal and vision and dream, all the kind of toxic or the addictive behaviors that we all have as humans, instead of kind of judging yourself for that, you feel love for those parts of yourself. You can see them as something that's innate within our human experience. And there's many, many other signs, like feeling at one with nature, enjoying silence. But take a look on I've got a video out about all the details there.
Mhm. Oh, it's so lovely. And it's so nice to be able to kind of hear some of these things and think, oh my God, yes, 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 actually. These are all beautiful ways in which you can feel like you're in alignment with your path. And it's funny because when you begin to feel all these lovely things in comparison to the pain you feel when you're not in alignment, and I often say to people coming through with, anxiety, low mood, these type of things, I'm like, it's all a sign from the body. Let's see how we can bring you into a state of alignment so you can experience things like this lovely space, the blissful feeling within the body. There's been so much happening in my familial setting, and with all the madness of kind of hospital admissions and all these things that are happening over the last couple of months. And people keep saying to me, how are you managing all that? But it's quite interesting because I feel like I'm present as an observer with a lot of it, but my body still feels energetically very vibrant, that I can hold the space for people. And I think a part of this beautiful journey you bring people on with mastering self, essentially, when people come through to me and they're like, I'm so fatigued, I've no energy, you know, it's lovely to know that actually when you get through the other side of working through a lot of this stuff, there's an innate energy, a beautiful divine energy that flows through the body that will actually power you through challenging times. You're not depleting the kind of finite amount of energy within which you feel is within the body.
Yeah, I think your story is a great testament to the work that you've done because, I think clearly when you're tapped into a higher source of energy or divine energy, then you can cope with enormous things like what you're going through, Tony. So, I think that that's a great sign that, like I said, our human self, even our human body, is very limited. So that's why it's so important to spend time being connected to something higher, because there's only so much you can
Mm.
do from a logical space or from the physical space. And and
Mm.
yeah, I mean, so I suppose the mantra really is you don't have to try and solve all your problems, because there's a lot of help at hand if you develop a relationship
Mm.
with it. You need to spend time with it and connect with it and understand it.
Yeah. That's beautiful, Nilesh. And I suppose just before we finish up, and you were mentioning looking or for people finding help. Do you do one-to-one consultations? Do you do group work? How can people access your services?
That's very kind. Yeah, I do one-to-ones. I tend to work with wellness entrepreneurs, and usually people who have this dream or vision that serves humanity, and tends to be people who are materially full but spiritually hungry. If that speaks to you, definitely reach out. I currently have grateful to have a wait list at the moment, but please do reach out because I love hearing from everyone. And the group, I've run various groups, it should bring such a smile to my face. But what's secretly going on, and I'll let out a little bit of a secret here, is I've been training up in energy healing to do at a group level. And so that's going to be rolled out once I'm done with my certification. So watch this space, because I have seen huge shifts in my own transformation through energy healings. And so I will be starting to run some group healings in the future.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. I can't wait to hear what's to come because, as someone who works with energy, the transformation, it's just so profound, the impact that energy healing can have on people's lives. Like I it still blows my mind that people come through to me and after a session they're telling me what's happened within their world and the ripples that continue to affect their world for many weeks and months afterwards. And I think when people come through and they're open to kind of seeing how it can impact their lives, it's just so powerful. And I love that you were creating this space for people to be able to explore that. So I'm super excited to see what's to come. And thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners at all before we finish up?
What's just intuitively come to me is I'd love to share that forgiveness is often the thing that we are missing. Self forgiveness, forgiveness of others. And so, if you're in that place of trauma or pain or suffering, forgiveness is a phenomenal place to start. Um, all the overthinking is from underfeeling. So that's a message, and I know it's really difficult. I too have felt a lot of resistance to it, but it is the key. It's the key to your freedom and your salvation and your liberation.
Mm,
And what could be more important than that?
yeah. Oh, I love that. That's such a beautiful note to finish on, Nilesh. I'd seen so many posts this week that resonated deeply with me about forgiveness, and I often see through the work that I do, it's the torment that people live within when they're in that very challenging space of moving towards forgiveness, but they're not quite ready. And the world goes on around them, not realizing that this world of torment is whirring around inside the body. And I 100% love that you've brought this in as the final note because it's such a key to actually finding freedom with a lot of the people that I work with. And actually once they can get to that point and free themselves, because it's the turmoil that's being created within their own inner world, and free themselves with the forgiveness, and we can release that energy, it it's literally like a weight is taken off the shoulders, and whether that's even with themselves, you know it can be just so transformative. So thank you so much for bringing that in as our final note. So thank you so much, Nilesh. It's been such a pleasure. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I'm fascinated by what you do, and I think all the beautiful pointers that you've given people today. I know that they'll be able to start tapping into those elements. And from the previous episodes of the podcast, people come through to me and they're like, I heard this and I need to talk to you about it. So I have no doubt that you've given so many beautiful tools and planted lots of gorgeous seeds in the subconscious and conscious mind that will come to fruition for people as a result of it. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so beyond grateful. Thank you,
Thank you
Nilesh.
so much, Tony. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to Becky as well.
So from my heart to yours, this is Dr. Anthony Rafferty, and I will look forward to chatting to you next week.